So now for something completely different, right? I don't have a demo, unfortunately. Following Kelsey, I wouldn't attempt to do a demo anyway because I can't recover nearly as well as he can when it fails miserably. So, in full disclosure, this is normally kind of a sponsor type session, right? And when we kind of sponsor these events, and normally people get up here and say, hey, here's how you can, buy my stuff or invest in me. Really, what I wanted to do instead was kind of have a quick discussion on why Intel is here, right? Because everybody's going, why is the silicon guy here? And then the second thing is actually how we're investing in you, and then how we can all go and drive innovation forward together. So without further ado, we kind of talk about things in software-defined infrastructure. It's actually in the title, I guess, on the previous slide for the things that I do. We have a lot of customers, right? Probably, well, not probably, but we know more customers even than Google does. And so we get a lot of feedback from them, all of these customers saying, hey, here's the problems that we're trying to solve, and how can we go solve that? And so the way to go solve that is through what we call software-defined infrastructure, what everybody else calls kind of programmatic infrastructure or infrastructure as code. And so the things that we're doing here today, the things that we're talking about, these all play into that, and we love this innovation because it actually helps our customers drive their innovation, their new applications, and everything forward. What we want to do is get to a world where somebody can have a light bulb innovation in a second, right? And then have something written and coded and an MVP in production in under one day. And then as a joke, right, we don't like a downtime very much because that looks bad for all of us. And so can we get to the mythical 5, 6 nines of performance, always uptime type of concept. So we kicked off what was called the Cloud for All initiative, which was kind of the umbrella investment that we're doing in things like Cloud Native Compute Foundation, the OCI, Kubernetes itself. We do a lot of work around OpenStack. We've done work in Apache Mesos. Who here knows that Intel is probably, I have to look today, but either the #1 or #2 contributor to Linux kernel, yeah. We have about 4,000 to 6,000, depending upon how you count, engineers that do open source software that help drive these types of things forward. So I'm just the kind of the latest representative up here talking about these things. But we really think that driving this type of innovation, right, having these types of communities and really working on these types of technologies is really powerful and very helpful for us all. So it's not just, hey, we can go do some marketing events and we can sponsor these things. One of the biggest things when we started talking to David and we started talking to Craig when he was there at Google, and when we started talking to the Cloud Native Compute Foundation ourselves, is like, hey, what can we actually do materially that will help push Kubernetes forward? And the first thing we got is, well, don't throw more developers at us, right? We've got lots of that, right? We actually need to figure out kind of how we can go, wrangle all of the development that's coming in, right? How do we go make sure that the code is really stable and that the projects that we want to have attached to these types of cloud native compute deployment methodologies, right, are really, valuable to everyone. And so we said, well, we kind of have hardware. So one of the things that we did is we deployed the first 500 nodes of a 1,000-node cluster along with SuperNAP in Las Vegas. That's been available. It's been used by IBM on about 300 nodes to figure out how do you run Kubernetes and containers on top of OpenStack at scale. Red Hat OpenShift has done a lot of performance tuning and scaling for Kubernetes on top of it. We're doing things like there's a Zika virus thing going on with Boink right now to use the cluster and drive up the performance so we can kind of see how things happen at scale. And all of these things start to be handed back into the community, right? Usually that is actually one of the major criteria for being on the cluster, right? Is, hey, it has to be open source, and you have to contribute back. Those contributions back into the community can either be write-ups, right? Here's what we found, here's the caveats, here's how we did it, or they can be bug fixes, right? PRs, et cetera, et cetera. We've got 11 in the queue today, right? It's really easy to get access to the cluster itself. You just create an issue at CNCF/cluster, right? We're trying to come to you to gain access to these things. The other important thing about this is in the next 500 nodes goes online in Q1, so our total investment in 1,000 nodes, these are big, beefy machines. Will be about $20 million by the end of this week. And so the idea is we want you to be able to leverage these systems free of charge, right? And we only want you to just drive innovation, drive the scale, drive the performance, drive the things that people need to operationalize these types of deployment methodologies. And so with that, right, the other thing is, who here operates clouds, right? Okay, good. So you know it's hard to do, right? Now, we are learning our way through this, right, as a team. We've got about 3 people dedicated to this, and we're offering something slightly different than most people do on this system is bare metal, complete bare metal. We'll give you IPMI access if you want it, right? And multi-tenancy IPMI access is very difficult, so we're working through all the bugs. So if you get on the system, you have a problem, let us know about it, preferably not up on stage. Email works just fine. And we'd like to see you guys actually come in here. The other thing that we're opening up, I think Dan announced it recently, is applications, right? So who else here in the early days, right, started, of Linux when you were really kind of starting to deploy applications, right? When you had to figure out, okay, well, how do I do DNS on Linux? How do I do DHCP on Linux, right? You went to some of the things like SourceForge, or not SourceForge, but some of the different wiki sites, and there were really, really nice write-ups for here's the packages you pull down, here's the configuration files, here's what everything means. We'd love to see that type of community come up around all the various applications that people are going to deploy using Kubernetes. What are the caveats? How do you do it, right? How do we get more people driving this type of deployment methodology? And so we're opening the cluster up for access to any open source project that is willing to come in and containerize their applications, deploy them into the cluster using Kubernetes, and any of the other projects that are part of CNCF, as long as they then come back and do a write-up for how they did it, what they found, how it can be better next time. So we have also contributed significantly into Kubernetes, well, significantly as a start, right? It's getting better. We contributed the resource, what they call a lot of this CI pipeline testing and upstream computations for my team kind of going in there. We started the work with a company called Mirantis and with CoreOS to figure out how do you deploy OpenStack, right, if you do need VMs, right, on top of Kubernetes. So we're trying to bring, a very large community that is OpenStack, very focused on one deployment model, together with the community here at Kubernetes so that we can get the best of both worlds, right, and really get those types of applications out into the enterprise and the cloud service providers. So again, very, very short. I don't have a whole lot of things to demo up here today. You can get on our cluster, create an issue if you'd like to be on there. We'd love to have you. And with that, I just want to thank everyone, right? This is amazing to see. When Craig and myself and a few of the other board members of the CNCF board kind of got this thing kickstarted, we had no idea that it would grow this fast with this much quality, right? That's probably the biggest hallmark of a good community that you can have is A, it grows fast, but you maintain quality of the development and quality of the people that are offering their services into it. And so thank you for that, and keep innovating. Thank you.